So I'm super excited for the next panel. I think you saw from the last speaker, Jasmine, how important it is to have a community, to feel at home, to feel comfortable taking risks and entering a new space. And so the panel here is going to be about that, about how do you get into robotics? What are the resources? What are the opportunities? So I'd like our panel to start out by, again, telling who they are and what they do, but then to go into why robotics? What motivated you to go into robotics? And did someone make you feel at home in robotics? So go ahead, you can go first.
Sure. Oh, I do. Can you hear me? Hi, my name is Jillian Ogle. I had a startup not too long ago called Let'sRobot.tv. So my background's a little bit different than some of the people here, but somewhat related to the last speaker. What was your name, Jasmine?
Jasmine.
Yeah, so I spent a lot of my early time in the game space. I actually spent my first 10 years as a professional artist, mostly in the games industry, doing like advertising and stuff like that. While I was in the games industry, I got into game design while I was working at Disney Interactive, and then contributed to launching a few games there. After that, I went independent and did some of my own games. I learned a lot about software. I started building my own games in Unity. And then one of the things that I started doing at home, because I was home developing a lot, was live streaming my development to Twitch. And then I sort of had a lot of fun interacting with the people who were watching. And so what got me into robotics was building hardware experiments for them to interact with me while I was doing stuff. So I built a little robot. They could drive around my house using Twitch to control it. So you could see like the camera and stuff like that. And then that sort of spurred me into building an open telerobotics platform, which is what I'm working on now. And through this journey, even though I got really embedded in the game space, right, I had to sort of work my way up from the bottom when getting into the robotics space. And that was happening a few years ago. And things have advanced like quite a bit since then. And it's taken me quite a while to find the people who really like welcomed and embraced me into the field. Andra's like a big part of that, and she's super awesome. And yeah, I'd say that I don't think I've ever properly worked at like a robotics company. I've gotten a couple of job offers, but yeah, it's like a space that I wasn't really sure that, I didn't think that I'd be as interested in it as I am because of, the way that it can impact things and impact the world and like how much more work there is to do. And I'm a usability and interactive design person. That's like sort of my core skill set. And so I see like a lot of opportunity like in the robotic space, and I don't see that expertise sort of applied into the way humans and robots interact. And so that's what I spend my time on.
That's fantastic. Yeah, this idea of starting over, like I will testify to that as well, that you're going to have a lot of different jobs. And what's great is about robotics can help you solve a problem that you're working on. Now, you may not have thought that was the direction you were going to go, but then...
Yeah, and now I've built like several dozen robots. I've built my own telerobotics platform, and yeah, so it's been an interesting journey.
Fantastic. Yeah. And Eric, how did you come to this?
Yeah, it's amazing. Thank you for being part of I'm so humbled to be part of this amazing panel. I know most of these folks. I probably, much like Jasmine, really that story really spoke to me. I mean, wanting to, I saw, this is dating me because I don't have a lot of hair, but I saw some old robots on PBS. Yeah, I know it sounds like a long time ago, and I thought, I put that in the back of my mind. I think years later when I was doing computer science, I thought, I like this, but I like building things. I like physical things. I like things that kind of have some physical interaction with the world. And so the idea that I could do that, I suddenly remembered that and thought, wait a second, that could be a career? That's amazing. Like, how could you do that? I was really following Jasmine's sort of passion for that. I love that. Also, I do want to say something about the role I play here in sort of as faculty in the Invention Lab and in Jacobs, which is the Design Institute. And that's where, of course, it's a creative space for those of you who've been there. It's a lot of tools and technologies, but really it's for me to kind of watch and listen and get out of the way. There's amazing kind of projects that work there. I know we're going to hear about some of them. But to give you a sense, this is a space that really is designed to let students from all kinds of disciplines. This is also where I think Jasmine really spoke to me with this disciplinary interest. But we have not only this space opened with the sort of impetus to have some classes in there and really start thinking about physical projects. So if you'll lend me some license to say something about robotics that's a little bit about interactive experiences with physical devices. So it's not always maybe something that roams around on the ground or flies through the air, but has other kinds of physical interactions. There's a class I teach, critical making, and in that we spend a lot of time, of course, talking about technology, but also critiquing it. And we explicitly put and foreground ideas around gender and feminism. We put this into the readings, we put this into the practice. We talk about it throughout the class on who's being included, who's being excluded. We also, in the lab, have projects where there's a leadership model, and certainly there's many of you maybe have interacted with some of these people, Chris Myers and Kwon Ju and Dan Chapman, but we also have super users that are trusted users that have demonstrated excellence in their own abilities and skills, and that is consistently made up of kind of majority female sort of super users as a leadership model. They are the ones leading the kinds of projects that people do in discussions. I also should say that we kind of put these little vignettes into every moment of interaction in this space. So I always say, come for the laser cutter, but stay for the community. And I think that's probably true for a lot of us. We just want to cut something sometime, we want to get the job done. But hopefully you encounter something that triggers another thought. So one of the programs we developed was this thing, the GoFab project. So you could actually come and take a 3D printer out, check it out like a book. And of course, students wanted to do that, but all the printers that had a little name and a little bio about different people who had pushed on inclusion and equity, and so it was little kind of hidden messages that you would be prompted to think about those kinds of issues. And finally, the projects that I think people have done in the classes and in the makerspace, that they speak a lot around issues of gender and inclusion and equity, things around foregrounding sexual harassment, foregrounding projects. There was a dress that pushed back when people got too close to you in public space. There was a tie that listened and heard misogynistic language. It slapped you in the face. These are certainly one-liners, and they get you to sort of have a humorous response. But then I'm encouraged when I see people wanting to address those very important issues and bring them to the foreground and have a conversation about them.
Yeah, I think, I want to echo what you said in terms of cross-sector and diverse teams. We're having an event this week for innovators at Cal, and one of the goals there is not only to showcase people who have ideas and, want to build something and want to solve a problem, but to also connect them with the diverse talent that they need. Maybe they need a data scientist, maybe they need a English major who can really help to communicate what they're doing. So I'm glad to hear that you really welcome across all different majors there. So Mai.
Hi everyone, I'm Mai. I am, actually I took a little bit of a different route because I'm actually a PhD in neuroscience. During my time as a PhD, I was also one of the super users that Eric has been talking about lately. But it was interesting to me is the integration of science, engineering, and robotics and how that could be utilized as a tool to assist scientists into accelerating and speeding up what has been kind of an archaic way or an expensive way of thinking about, thermal scientists, having robots doing something for you, but when you pay for it, it becomes thousands of dollars, hundreds of thousands of dollars actually. And for me, I started out in the invention lab, actually walking in, not knowing a single thing actually. The only thing I knew was biology, and I think creating that environment when I first came in, there was probably only 2 or 3 women in the lab, but it's become and transitioned to something where most of the time I see actually women in there, and I think having that capability of supporting and an environment where women are able to come in and learn anything, whatever background you're coming from, is something that's been quite important to me. Right now I'm actually the CEO of Optoceutics, which is basically a light therapy company, but we utilize robots and hardware technology in order to advance our light therapy. And so, yeah, that's a little bit about me.
So did any one person really make you feel at home when you came into the space?
Definitely. I think Chris was there, and also the super users. They were, as much as I love breaking things in the lab, I'm sure I'll be part of the wall of shame in there, but they were very welcoming, and they said, it's okay. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay, as long as you just talk to us and be able to learn from that mistake. And, it's you try and try again. Failure is what allows your brain to grow, so.
Danielle, tell us about your story.
Yeah, so my formal education background is in materials science, but I found that I mostly just wanted to solve problems to make people's lives better, and ended up running a government project to build desktop-sized robotics for high-precision cutting. So instead of like a 3D printer, where you like add layers to build a shape, this was a CNC milling machine where you cut away layers. And we were really building a class of robotics that hadn't been built before. And my journey towards robotics was mostly from the leadership perspective, but I will say that my role was bringing a lot of people who had never seen themselves as roboticists or even robot adjacent into robotics, because we built out a production facility actually in Berkeley and manufactured thousands of robots a year. And there was something Jasmine said really resonated with me, which was like, it is kind of like, it's like it's the Wild West in a way. Robotics still is, and there's a lot of space. And I think that particularly for the women and non-traditional folks that joined our company and learned about manufacturing robots or designing robots, they are really able to go on and do kind of anything they wanted now after having a couple of years in that space with us. And I think the reason is powerful things happen at the intersection, and robotics is like intersection of hardware and software and interfacing with humans. And if you're building something that's never been done before, you probably have to write it down. So like documentation is really important, and there's like firmware and it's sort of, specific electronic stuff. And so it just brings in a little bit of everything. And I think that's one of the reasons why a career in robotics is so powerful, is because especially if you start there, you can kind of go anywhere. But also if you work at a small company, you can touch a lot of different things and see how they all come together. So the folks who worked with us have gone on to have great careers. And now that leads me to what I'm doing now, which is Daughters of Rosie, bringing more women into manufacturing. So not specific to robotics, although some of the companies that we work with are in robotics. And our challenge is attracting women who have never seen themselves doing anything hands-on in the world, and getting them to have enough skills to be hired in a hands-on role, and then inspiring them to go on to get degrees and whatnot. So that's what I'm doing now.
So you felt there was a need for that. Does that mean maker spaces don't work well for women as they exist today?
If I only had one word, I'd say no. Yeah, and I think that there are some women that power through, but by and large, it's sort of more well suited for specific personality types. I would say it's like the explorer type of person. Maybe not well suited to folks, and this is true for any gender, but like not well suited to folks who like to learn by observing for a long period of time, gathering up information, and then acting. It's sort of like, you must act. And so I think that it attracts people who are very used to, well, I'm just going to go in there and do stuff. And that's not really for everyone. So I would say that, I think that especially for people who haven't even been invited to any kinds of hands-on work in their life or technical work in their life. You need other types of communities to bring those people in. And that is sort of what we do at Daughters of Rosie, is like women who have been in the service industry, but who are also like the one who's always putting together all the IKEA furniture and like watching all the YouTube videos and that, but has never been invited into a hands-on or technical career. Like, she really needs other women just like her to feel like she can make that transition of identity, most of all.
Ma, you've been working kind of globally and trying to create spaces. What's your experience in other countries?
Well, yeah, I've been working in Sweden and Denmark, mainly Scandinavian countries so far, and it's quite interesting with the school educational system in Denmark is that, you know, you go to a technical school or you go to a biological school, so they're completely separated. And, you know, at the Danish Technical University, DTU, you see a majority of male. It's very male dominated in terms of the engineering, technology, and photonics. But they recently, in the last 2 or 3 years, they have a paradigm shift in which they've kind of wanted to advance young girls in STEM, but also in robotics and photonics. And so we've been having a lot of high schools and middle school girls coming through to the university, in which we hold workshops, daily workshops for students over the 3-week work course in the summer that allows students, whether it is you want to learn how to do Arduino or to build your own robots for those couple of weeks, you have professionals in those area, which has been a really eye-opening in terms of the trend that Denmark is going to right now. So yeah.
Well, I know there's a lot of expertise in the room as well, and I want to have a couple people raise their hand. I believe there are a number of tech women in the audience. Can you raise your hand, tech women? I know there's 2 over here. So the tech women is, the one I'm referring to, there are a lot of tech women in this room, is a State Department program that brings women from the Middle East, North Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa, Central Asia here. And a number of these women are in the audience today because they're creating robotics labs in their home universities, in their home countries. So Eric, what do we need to do to make worker spaces work for women?
Yeah, no, I think, and Danielle is right on with these kind of wider landscape of kind of engagement practices that aren't always about the kind of frenetic making, that they have lots of different engagement points. From an academic standpoint, I think it's basically allowing room for that conversation. It's empowering those individuals to take leadership roles and to kind of celebrate the ideas and the artifacts and the creations that get made in that domain. And too often it is true that there's, I mean, back to Mai's point, that there's too much sort of male-dominated conversation. I think also the idea that when I look at projects that excite me, they are coming from so many different perspectives, gender, economic, cultural, and we need more of that in the world. I think the programs that you're talking about are starting to have that conversation be at the forefront.
So if they're setting up a lab from scratch, are there a couple of even organizational things that they should keep in mind?
I think the usual thing is, I mean, you really want to be inviting and open. And I think also Mai kind of brought it up that, you know, it's not a place where you're in trouble for being there or breaking things or doing things. You want to encourage all kinds of activities, all kinds of conversations. A lot of people get obsessed with people come and say, what should I have in this space? It's about buying the right tools. Of course, there have to be some physical things to kind of activate the space and get people curious. But it's largely, I find, creating a space people want to be in, whether or not they're making things or just physically there, because the kinds of conversations you overhear, the kinds of artifacts lying around and materials, that if you can create that is it's difficult, but that's really important.
Yeah, and I like the idea of the super users being kind of like peer coaches and helping people. I know our Blum Institute makes sure like 50% of the mentors are women. So, you know, those type of things I think can also help people feel at home. Jillian, what do we need to do to bring more women into robotics?
Well, there's a few things. So I'd say as far as the makerspace question goes, I think people who are running makerspaces should probably do a little bit more of that sensitivity training, or that should be kind of like on their radar. Because I'd say that that's sort of probably the thing that drives a lot of women out of those spaces. And I think it's also important to make sure to set aside like events and things specifically for women. So for instance, like I go to this Women Who Code event that's like the women's JavaScript study group, because I've been teaching myself JavaScript. And it's really awesome because it's just like, sometimes it's like 30, 40 women. They've all got this like various level of skill set. And you know, it's like one of the first groups like that I've just felt like kind of welcome and not like intimidated. And so like one of the things that I've been doing also is trying to recreate that, but with like robotics. So I was working with Andra on the Women's Half Day. And you should all come too if she hasn't mentioned. And yeah, so there's some of that. And then conversely, like from just a corporate standpoint, right? Like I've had so many conversations with companies that ask me about like, you know, hiring more women or getting more women like in tech, and usually it's just more of a core cultural issue. Like if you're not inclusive as a company culture, it's going to be a lot harder to be inclusive later on, and I think that's part of why it gets so intimidating going into some of these tech companies, because they're trying to pivot from one thing to the next, and I applaud them for that. But at the same time, it's like something you should address as soon as you can.
Yeah, that's something that we've been talking to both startups and venture capitalists. Like, you need to have a diverse team when you've got 3 or 4 people, not waiting until you have 20 people and kind of a culture's already embedded and growing. I'd like to invite some questions from the audience. Yes, over here.
Hi, my name is Marcela. I wanted to comment on the education part, how to get more women into tech. I think it starts very, very early. And let's say if you're a young girl and all the toys you're getting are dolls, and if you're a boy, all the toys you're getting are blocks and cars and, tinkering sets and whatnot, then naturally, as a boy, you'll be interested in engineering roles. And as a girl, you'll be dreaming about being a wife and a mother. I mean, nothing wrong about that, but I feel like this is where it starts. So I wish that when I was a kid, I had a tinkering set and maybe, a robot that I could build by myself. And I think this is where it begins. Maybe more companies out there producing toys for girls that are actually educating them. Hey, you can be an engineer, you can be an astronaut, you can be whatever you want. But if you cannot imagine it as a little girl, you will not go in this direction. So every time when I would like to go to a garage and fix something and learn something, maybe my uncles or my dad would tell me, oh, you're a girl, you don't know anything about this. This is for boys. And in the meantime, my brother, who was much younger, he would get help and patience and attention that I didn't get only because I was a girl. So I would love to see more programs for very, very young kids, for very young girls, who will never have a chance to actually discover their passion. Thank you.
Totally agree with you. And I was actually on one of the first software products for girls. It was the American Girl software, and it was a real learning curve because they wanted to solve problems, right? And so couching a lot of the technology and the learning tools around how this can achieve a bigger aim was part of that process. And the other thing I'll just drop is that in the networking and reception, we've got a lot of the programs that do a lot of work for younger girls. And as the people in this audience, I highly recommend that you go be mentored, but I also highly recommend that you go mentor. Being able to explain things in simple terms makes you a better teacher, you understand your topic a lot better as well. So there'll be a lot of those opportunities in the networking and reception as well. Other questions? Back here.
Hi, my name is Peace. I'm from Nigeria on the Tech Women program. I have never built a robot. I'm a greenhorn in the robotics space, but I run a foundation where my students really have interest in robotics. So I want to know how to get into that community for their sake, and then, where to start from. Thank you.
So also international support, yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the key things to get women into robotics, as well as in tech in general, is to see what they're interested in terms of the biological side, in terms of how do you utilize these technologies and these robots for specific areas. You know, you want to be interdisciplinary at the same time. Is cross-disciplinary is some of the main thing right now, being diverse in that sense. Oftentimes in Denmark, what we're doing is we're basically pollinating KU and DTU and saying, you know, if you're interested in bloodborne pathogens, how do we utilize this to teach young girls or even other students how to build robots to efficiently determine, you know, the frequency at which, like the temperature for these things. And I think that's how we should integrate it in terms of piquing what they're interested early on, to your point, but also in the college level, if that's not provided, saying, you know, robotics is just not only for engineers, it's not only for mathematicians, it's for your scientists, it's for your communication, it's for everything that we can think about, but how do we apply it is the most important thing.
Anyone else want to answer?
Yeah, when I'm explaining to like really, really young kids about robotics, I use the elevator as an example because I'm like, it's this mechanical thing that you step into, and if you do nothing, it does nothing. But then you tell it where to go, and in this particular robot, you push the button for what floor you want to go to, and magically the robot takes you where it needs to go. And I think that in some ways, just like breaking things down into like simple motions or the simplest interaction that you can have with a piece of electronics, like pushing a button and a thing does a thing, that is a robot. Maybe you push a button and a thing does a thing, but then it does something else. Like you can build on the complexity, but I think like the smallest possible description of what is a robot and just trying to make it very accessible. And like you said, like bringing it back to whatever it is your interest, but also what is a problem that you see in the world every day? How might we solve that by making an elevator that actually solves this problem? And I think it gets people thinking more in the human perspective of like, what bothers me about the world? Like maybe it's like my mom, every time she gets out of the car, she has all of her groceries in her arms and then like she can't unlock the door or whatever it is. Like it can be anything that's around you. But starting from the perspective of like robotics is actually very simple. A mechanical thing, an electrical thing that takes a signal, and a way for a human being to interact with it, or a sensor to interact with it.
Yeah, and thinking about the different sectors. How are robotics used in health? How are they used in smart cities? How are they used in climate, right? Like all of these have like sensors, but then there has to be something that the sensor is connected to, and it has to cause something to happen, right? So thinking along those lines as well. More questions?
I was going to say, can you keep your hand up if you have a question so that we can get the mic to you? And do I see any hands? Then, do you have another question, Gillian, or is this a wrap? We have questions. Yeah. I knew they would come out.
So for somebody that supports students, I'm just curious, from your industry expertise, what can we do better? Are there any micro actions or just little things that we can do to help, I guess, build confidence in women in robotics, or just make sure that they feel included?
Yeah, and I'll just add to that, each one of you, if you could take a shot at answering that, and what is creating a sense of belonging, whether maybe a startup lens, industry lens, what's your final advice?
Oh, sure. I think that helping people connect the dots between where they are now and what they see that they want to be, and then being like, okay, well, let's break that down, because like it can feel very, very far away to be like, I do see this woman up on stage who's a roboticist and she does look like me, but like, what do I do today that like gets me moving towards that? And just like helping people take what feels infinite and maybe very impossible, breaking it into very small chunks, and then even getting to the point where it's like, just this month, what could you do that could move you closer to that? Because it's a lot easier to think about things in like a couple week span where you're like, this is my path, and as long as I focus here, then I eventually will get there. So I think just like doing a little bit more work to help people build that mental map of where they're gonna go to get from A to B, I think is helpful.
I love that. I was just talking with my mentee today, and he was asking, like, you know, I've always asked, like, where do I want to be in my career 20 years from now? And he's like, what I really want to know is, what should I be doing next week? What is the small thing I can do?
Yeah, I think for me, it's more like having the availability of mentors and being able to be open enough to say, I'm okay getting out of my comfort zone. And a lot of women especially they've been trained as a young age, you know, you should be a housewife, to your point. But just having the information out there saying, you know, you can be anybody, but, you know, also having someone like, let's say, Eric and Jillian, just to be able to be there and saying, welcome in, like an environment, and say, you can come in, you can do whatever you want to do. It's okay to ask questions, and I think creating that environment for a lot of the young students, that will make it more possible for women, but also creating opportunities and foundations that will fund them, because a lot of them could be from lower economical social statuses that might not have that opportunity. You know, whereas students in Oakland or students in the inner Richmond cities, those opportunities are also very limited, and I think having those opportunities are important.
Yeah, so remembering back to when you first started robotics and what it was like, and empathizing with somebody just coming into the space. I was talking to this gentleman who was approaching male allyship through micro adjustments. So rather than microaggressions, what are micro adjustments? What are small things you can do that will make people just feel a little more welcome? And cumulatively, those make a huge difference. So just, you know, welcoming people when they come into the space, or asking them, you know, could I help you? You know, those little things can really add up.
Yeah, I think there's one thing in the Invention Lab that we do. We invite 8th grade students coming in, and they're just students. We'll take cardboard pieces of paper, paper clip, and copper tape. And you're literally just completing the circuit and teaching them that you can make a little paper robot just by completing a circuit. Something as simple as that, where you take a child's mind and say, look, all you gotta do is cut this up into looking like whatever animal you want, put a tail on it, put googly eyes on it, but there you go. That's your first robot. That's the first robot you've created, and it also opens up their creativity, and also tell them they can do this. If they can do this with just some cardboard paper or even parchment paper, what else can they do, you know?
Eric and Jillian, last comment.
I'm very much in Danielle and Mai's. I think it's making space. I think it's this idea that seeing people along their career trajectories, to your point. So I know you mentioned we have often, you know, femtech or girls in engineering. We have high school students and elementary school students. But seeing people, I think, it's often great to see role models in a career, but to your point, seeing like, yeah, what do I do next week, next month? Like, what's these kind of things that I can relate to more? That's really a part of it. So certainly, I know in the Invention Lab we make room for those activities and those communities to have a place to kind of build on that and welcome that.
Jillian.
Yeah. So the thing that gets you started is you have to show people that this is possible, that there is a path, right? That I can do this thing, and it's possible for me to, do that thing, because this person over here is like me, and I can do that. And like that's a great starting point. And you have that sort of like long-term inspiration, aspiration, but then you have to follow that up with really objective, clear, short-term goals eventually. Right, while also creating those safe spaces where it's safe to, and to play around, to ask questions, to fail, and to show that it's okay to fail. Right, so that's all like a big part of it. So it really helps to have role models to sort of like get you, thinking about it, to get you started, and then making sure that that information is out there enough so the people who are like kind of looking around thinking, wow, this is like kind of cool, I want to get into it, they have somewhere to reach.
Because it is kind of cool.
Yeah.
A big round of applause for our panel.